At 5:30, I will call the meeting to order. Our first item is the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome, everyone, to tonight's meeting. The mission of the Marshall Public Schools is to educate, support, and prepare all learners for success. Next item is approval of the agenda.
Motion to approve.
Second. Motion by Jeff and a second by Tim to approve our agenda. Any additions or corrections? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. The agenda is approved. Next item is our Tiger Spotlight. I'll let you take this.
You don't want to read this one?
Go ahead.
Yeah. It's School Board Appreciation Month. We just want to take time to thank our school board members. You guys do a lot of work behind the scenes, a lot of things that people don't even realize what's going on, a lot of committee meetings, a lot of time and effort, and we really appreciate everything you do. I'm very proud of the school board we have and the collaboration and the conversations about what's best for kids in Marshall. So thank you all for the work you do. As a little token of appreciation, some of our elementary students have made some things for you. So we hung them up on the wall, but take whatever you'd like for your office or your home or something when we're done. But I thought they were cute. So Parkside has a couple things to pass out here too.
Yes, from our littlest learners. Thank you for all that you do.
Thank you.
You are appreciated.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Tiffany.
Thank you guys.
Thank you.
Well, thanks everyone from the preschool to Southview and all the kids and students. We appreciate it. So. Public forum. Is there anybody from the public want to approach the board? Seeing no one, we'll move on to our presentation, our READ Act changes. Welcome, ladies.
Thank you.
So we've been talking kind of, well, for a number of years now, but especially this fall, we've talked a lot about some of the READ Act things that are taking place and some exciting things at Parkside. So we're excited to have Darcy and Tiffany here to share some specific updates with you about what's going on.
Yes. Well, you guys know that this is my passion, and I always get excited when we get to talk about this. So thank you for having us here today to share with you.
I did tell Darcy she has to be done by 9 o'clock, so.
I could go on that
figured.
long, honestly. Yeah, I'm sure Jeremy usually sees my number come across. He's like, oh, boy. What now? But anyway, I just thought it would be fun to share with you a little bit about where we've been, where are we now, and where are we going. And so prior to 2021, I know that we've shared with you a number of times, you know, how things were going, and we always felt like we were making some progress. You know, we were using balanced literacy, which had emerged in about the 90s, somewhere in there, and it was kind of that middle ground between whole language and the phonics-based approach. There was the whole reading wars, and then they kind of came in the middle and said, well, we're going to do balanced literacy. So it's kind of a combination of those two approaches. And like everybody else in the state of Minnesota, you know, that was really what was recommended as best practice, and we kind of all bought into that. And I know it wasn't for lack of passion, because we all were working very hard and trying to do the very best we could. And we would see small glimmers of hope. We would see a little bit of progress here and there. You know, we would get to the point where we felt like we were meeting the needs of about 60% of our students. And we were thinking, okay, that's pretty good. But still, it just never felt right. We never felt super confident and able to look at a student and say, this is what we need to do for them to get them to that next level. And so I would say, or I know, 2021-22 was kind of the perfect storm. Several things happened that year. One of them was that the year previous we had talked about the phonics instruction. We had used a progression of skills that we would teach, but we didn't have like a program for our teachers to follow. So it was a lot of our teachers just using self-created materials and things to teach that phonics lesson. And our teachers didn't feel confident in their ability to teach phonics well with the resources they had. And so we spent that summer talking about what was programs were out there that would help us with that. And so one of the things we did was we adopted Really Great Reading, which is our phonics program. And so part of the Really Great Reading mission, I guess, is also to help teachers better understand the science of reading and how kids learn to read. So we had, explored what all was available through Really Great Reading and kind of learned some things there. Another thing that happened was in August of 2021, I started to work on my reading dyslexia certification through the University of Florida. And the very first class I took was the Foundations of Literacy Development. And in that course, I would say there were two things that happened that caused me to go, holy buckets. One of them was an article called Hard Words by Emily Hanford. And she just talks about the reason why students are struggling with reading. And it was because educators did not know about the science of reading and how reading develops. It's one of those articles you have to curl up your toes a little bit because it really kind of hits home and it's like, ooh, yeah, they kind of called the teachers and education out for maybe not using best practices and things like that. The other thing that we did in that course is we looked at policies nationwide as far as what their policies were for identifying dyslexia and reading instruction. And I would just say it's shortly after that I called Jeremy and I was like, oh boy. Stick with me here, but I think we got some work to do and I have some ideas. And thankfully, Jeremy, being who he is, didn't say, Darcy, stop. He listened and we did some brainstorming and things like that. The other thing that we did is we did a book study at Parkside, which was called Shifting the Balance. And it was 6 ways to bring that science of reading into what we were already doing in our balanced literacy classes. And so teachers were hearing a little bit about the science of reading through Really Great Reading and through the book study. And then I was also sharing with them information that I was learning through my courses at the University of Florida. And so these were the terms that we were exposed to that caused us to really take a step back and look at what our practices were and try to figure out where we wanted to go. So we learned about the science of reading. We learned about structured literacy, which is what is best practice and what we know about how kids learn to read. This is how they best learn how to read. I feel like balanced literacy, it was kind of a feely program or approach, whereas the science of reading is backed by science and research throughout all areas of research. So it's not just in education, but they looked at neuroscience. They looked at all types of different areas to figure out how kids learn to read. One of the big things was, looking at images of our brain when we are learning to read and comparing those images to those students who have dyslexia and what that looks like. And so we really learned about exactly how our brain takes in that information, what connections have to be made in order to learn to read. And then the structured literacy is how we form those pathways and how we teach kids to read. So they need to have all of those components in their instruction. And then we also learned about the simple view of reading, which is basically a math formula. So you look at students' ability to look and read words. So that is word recognition. So being able to automatically look at a word and knowing that if you look at a word right now, you can't not read it. It just automatically is in your brain what that word is. That's called word recognition. And then the other piece of that is you have to have language acquisition or language comprehension. So you have to be able to understand the vocabulary and words that I'm using. So when you take the word recognition times your language comprehension, that is reading comprehension. That's how much of a piece you will understand. So if you can read about half of the words and you can read or understand about half of the language, you're only going to get about 25% comprehension. So you can see how important it is to have both of those components in order to get to that reading comprehension. You can't skip one or be really good at one and not have the other. So that kind of set us off on a mission. Some people were like, okay, let's just like dip in our toes, see how things are, and we'll, kind of go from there.
But
I
not
sometimes,
I was gonna say that's not how Darcy does things.
I sometimes dive in without ever even looking to see if there's water in the bottom of the pool. Thankfully, there is typically, but so we dove right in, and we did a needs assessment that looked at all of those areas. So we evaluated what we currently were doing based on those best practices. So what we decided is that our goals would be to build teacher capacity and knowledge so that they understood that science of reading and how kids learn to read, and just give them confidence to know that they were able to meet the needs of our students. And then also assure that our teachers had the resources and systems in place to make sure that the needs of all of our students were met. And so over the next 3 years, this is kind of a breakdown of all of the different things that we did based on that evaluation guide that I talked about. And so in the Reading League, I found a curriculum evaluation guide that went through all of those components, and we did that every year. So we would go through that and we would say, so here are all of our areas of need. What do we want to tackle this year? And so the first year we implemented Haggerty and Dibbles. We also had 11 teachers volunteer to take letters training, which was a 2-year commitment. And then we started a Southview Parkside Literacy Committee or a team or an advisory team, just to make sure we were bringing everybody along and figuring that out as we go. The next year is when Minnesota did the READ Act, is when that actually started. And interestingly, that same year I went to the state principals conference, and I remember vividly being in a large group meeting where they were rolling out the READ Act and what that was going to require of districts. And so one of those things being that you could only use certain curriculum for literacy. And this came as many superintendents had just invested millions of dollars in balanced literacy. And so thankfully, that wasn't us. We had already been a couple of years on our journey, but it was hard for a lot of districts to get behind that because, again, that's what everybody was doing. They'd spent a lot of money and investing in those materials. We also then added our interactive read alouds. So in the letters training that we did, we found some templates for what those interactive read alouds would look like. And essentially it's reading a story out loud, but being very purposeful and intentional about that. So we take a book and we break it apart and talk about the vocabulary in there and being very purposeful and intentional about how we teach the vocabulary, because that's part of that language comprehension so that kids understand the vocabulary. We look at like the theme, we look at the messages, we break down like sentences that may not make sense to some of our kiddos. So we started our work on that. And then we also started looking at evaluating children's emergent writing. That was another area that we felt we maybe weren't where we needed to be. And again, all of that was identified as we did those curriculum evaluations at the end of every year. That's how we decided what to do for the next year. And then last year, we had all teachers complete the OLA, or that's through the core, which is the curriculum, I guess, if you will. And then all of our early childhood teachers completed letters. And so through all of that, this is where we are at today. So when we were looking at word recognition and language comprehension, so these are all of the practices and curriculums then that we use currently to meet the needs of our students. So the ones that have asterisks next to them are things that our early childhood teachers do as well. So we do really great reading. That is pre-K through grade 1. We do that in grade 2 too. 2 also. Haggerty, which is looking at that phonology, so hearing the sounds. A lot of times I thought this was always so interesting, and I never really thought about that, but when you are learning another language, or especially English, when you are saying words, how many times do we like combine sounds or leave off the endings? So that's really hard for our kids to spell a word when they aren't hearing all of the sounds. And so that's really what Haggerty is having them practice saying sounds, separating them out. So if the word is cat, saying k, at. So hearing every single sound and then recognizing that every single sound goes along with the symbol, and teaching that very explicitly and systematically. Handwriting without tears, we use that in early childhood as well. The dictated sentences is our spelling. Our spelling always goes along with our phonics. So it's not the spelling test like we used to take or at least when I was in school. You have your list of 25 words, and I never did very well on those. But they were never connected to what we were learning in phonics. And so our dictated sentences are evidence then of what they're learning in phonics to assure that they're understanding that. Foundational skills, we teach those to mastery. That automaticity is so important. We don't want kids' cognitive load to be spent on trying to sound out words. We want them to be able to automatically recognize words. So we're going to teach them all of those phonics skills so that they just automatically recognize words. So their cognitive abilities are freed up for that language comprehension. And then we use DIBELS. That's an interesting thing too. We found out last year before, I think it was, the state was going to give us a list of approved screeners and tools that you had to use. And so this was it. It was DIBELS, or in FastBridge.
DIBELS or FastBridge, and from
Yeah,
secondary.
those were the only two
CAPTE.
approved throughout the whole entire state. So thankfully we got that right. And then when we talk about language comprehension, as I shared, those interactive read alouds, looking at themes and very explicitly teaching vocabulary. We just started this year Haggerty Bridge to Writing, and I'm really excited about that. We had 6 teachers last year that piloted it. It's very rigorous, but it's what we've needed for some time for teaching writing. All of that goes hand in hand, the writing and reading. So we're really excited this year to see where that goes. And then we're using the Evaluating Children's Emergent Writing to evaluate our writing program and how we're doing with that.
Does the writing start pre-K too? Pre-K through 2?
The writing, they start more with like the handwriting without tears. So letter formation, and that's another thing that we teach to automaticity or to mastery, because again, we don't want them trying to think about how to print a letter. We want that to be automatic. So it's just, it just is already there. That connection is there.
So this covers our literacy core pieces. So every day, this is what we guarantee is going to be taught. And as you can see, it's a big list, but what we found is this is essential. And it's very exciting to see the carryover from pre-K, K1 and 2, that we found that it's working. So we need to continue to keep, if it works, keep doing it, right?
Right?
We're seeing great progress.
And I will say too, I have that simple view of reading. I would say that we've hit word recognition really hard in the last few years, and now we're really starting to get more into that language comprehension with the teaching the bridge to writing and those interactive read alouds. So, and this speaks for itself. These are our results over the last 3 years, and so At the beginning of the year, that is the number or the percent of students who were either at or above where we wanted them to be on DIBELS. So you can see 23, 25, 26 is typically about where we are at for kindergarten kiddos who come in with enough knowledge and understanding in DIBELS to be either meeting those expectations or exceeding. By the end of the year, we have had 78, 72, and then last year we had 82% of our kindergartners who were either meeting or exceeding those benchmarks, which is
Amazing.
amazing. Absolutely amazing. And then the same with first grade. Again, 42, 41, 34 is the percentage of students who come in that are not meeting those or exceeding those expectations. The end of the year, 75, 77, and 78% that are meeting or exceeding. Yeah, I think that is just phenomenal and so exciting. One of the other ways that I like to look at our data is through, this is called instructional effectiveness. It's a little hard to look at and understand at first until you know what you're looking at. So this is how DIBELS, the benchmarks that DIBELS uses. So they say you're either well below, below, at, or above. And so the numbers that are written, like if you look at kindergarten, the 78 students, 31, 19, and 19, that is the number of students who were in that benchmark at the beginning of the year. Then the bar graph below that shows what happened to those 78 students. Does this have like a little pointer on it? Oh, no, it sure does not. Oh, there. So of those 78 students, 16 stayed at the well below, 5 moved up to below, 41 moved up to at benchmark, 16 moved up to above by the end of the year. Does that make sense? For first grade, you can see the same thing. What happened to our 73 kids that came in? 15 of them stayed there. 23 moved up to the below, 33 moved up to at, and 2 moved up to above. And then when you combine all of them together, you can see out of 151 students at the beginning of the year who were below that bench or well below that benchmark, only 31 of them stayed there. I think that's phenomenal. And very exciting. And it speaks to the energy, effort, and dedication with our staff. That doesn't happen just by hoping and praying and trying really hard. That comes from studying and really looking at that data and being very focused and intentional with our instruction.
I'll just say, when you guys hear us talk about identifying individual needs and meeting individual needs, is a prime example of that happening, and the data that we get, the success we get with that. So thank you guys for your work on that. That's amazing.
Yeah. And I just, again, extend my sincere appreciation to all of our Parkside teachers and staff and their willingness to embrace those new approaches. That's not easy. And sometimes it's a little uncomfortable and causes some cognitive dissonance, but that's good sometimes. But the results are there. And I'm just very grateful for that. So, yeah.
I want to commend you too. You were 2 or 3 years ahead of the curve, everybody else. And some schools are just getting started on this stuff. And
Yeah,
it's really
some
cool
schools,
that we've been doing it for a couple of years and
Yeah.
you can see the results.
yeah. I will say our staff, when we took the core, like almost all of that was just review for them because we had already done a lot of that work. I know I've talked to other districts and teachers, and there's a lot of frustration because it was the first time they'd heard some of that, where we had already spent 2 or 3 years developing our understanding of those concepts. And so it wasn't anything brand new or crazy. Even our non-certified staff this year, they have to be certified or they have to take a course, and they did that at the beginning of the year. And so I've asked a few of them, like, how did that go? And they're like, yeah, it was really easy. Like, we've already talked about this. We've already done this. And so it's good reassurance, though. It's good to, like, okay, we did all of that work and now we did the right thing. And it's sometimes I think teachers get frustrated when it's the flavor of the month, and you do this for a little while and like, oh nope, we're going to do it this way now. Oh nope, we're going to do it this way now. So it's just been very affirming to know the work that they have done is the right work and the results show it, and all of the other stuff that's coming out with the READ Act has affirmed that as well.
Darcy, I just like to say for year after year after year, I know those folks not here anymore, but we used to talk over and over and over about how we had to get kids up by fourth grade. If
Yeah.
you're behind in fourth grade, they're going to be behind the whole time.
Yeah.
And we kept on setting different goals and different thought patterns. And it seemed like nationally, which includes our state, they were okay with having 35% not
Not
meet.
making it.
And I just want to commend you as a leader and your staff for saying, this isn't working.
Yeah.
There has to be something better. And you're just top administrator in my book by
Thank
far
you.
for taking the lead and doing that and bringing your team along. And it's not just you, but it's your whole team, how you could encompass your whole team to grasp this
Right.
and to have this kind of growth. You know, when we had No Child Left Behind, all they did was fill out paperwork.
Right.
There was never any
Not
improvement,
hopeful.
year after year after
Right.
year. But I just want to commend
Yeah.
you.
Thank you. And I think, again, I appreciate that. I would say that I couldn't do that without Tiffany and without all of our teachers. And I feel like, with, like you mentioned, No Child Left Behind, there's always mandates and telling you what you should have, but never how do we do that? And I think that's where we miss out sometimes is we don't give our teachers the tools that they need. They went through 4 years of college, but it's a different world. And also you don't learn what you need to know in college. You learn that in the field and being there every day and seeing how those things work with students, so, yeah.
We have great teachers and great staff people, but, and they're all on fire right now.
Yeah.
But you're the one that lit the spark.
Sometimes it's not a spark, it's more of a fire, but. I'm sorry, Sarah.
I was just saying that energy, it's infectious.
Yeah.
So if that's what the teachers are following,
Yeah.
what they're day to day or seeing from you, it's a lot easier to get them on board too.
Yeah, you can feel it just when she talks about this.
Yeah.
And I appreciate the measurables. I think that speaks wonders when you see, it's excited to be about the work, but when you see the measurables of how it actually is working, that's
Yeah.
very powerful.
Yeah.
So thank you for bringing
Yeah,
that.
of course. My pleasure.
Question, are they, what happens when somebody transfers in and they're in second grade and doesn't have this basic, are they going to, pull outs on reading programs to get them up to level?
Yeah, so we spend a lot of time talking about those friends. Oftentimes there are students who are showing us signs of dyslexia, and so that's where they need that intensive intervention and support. And so we have data meetings all throughout the year where we talk about kiddos. And so like those 31 students, we could probably name them because we know who they are. We know what kind of services they're getting, what they're going to need to continue improving and going on. When I talked about the 151 students, those ones that made it up to even below benchmark, at benchmark, and the 18 that made it to above benchmark, it's because the only way you can fix that is with intensive intervention. So that's more time and smaller groups. And so that's the only way that you will get students out of those well below areas. And some of them will likely need that support all throughout their elementary career until they have those skills solidified. It just takes them a lot longer, and you have to be very prescriptive with their instruction. So when we passed our first grade list off to second grade, our reading instructional coaches spend a lot of time making sure that they know what those needs are and what that looks like. Does that answer your question?
Yes, good.
So,
And what started as just a Southview Parkside literacy team, and we're starting at scratch, like, how are we doing? What's our purpose? Like, where are we going? We have so many ideas, and especially with Darcy at the helm, it's like, okay, steer the ship. And in 2 years, it's gone from 2 buildings to every building. And it's not just administration. We have our literacy staff at other buildings coming and joining our meetings too. So it's the whole district wide. We're focusing on literacy, and it's pretty neat because there isn't a lot of different committees that is pre-K through grade 12.
I think it's cool that you guys started all this before the state told us we had to do it. You know, it wasn't mandated. We just, you just did it on your own, so. And now the state tells everybody they
I know,
have to do it, so.
yeah. And you know, that's what I've always said to our staff, when we know better, we need to do better. And so we were doing the best we could when we were using balanced literacy. We just didn't know any better. But as soon as that all happened, we were like, oh, whoa, we can do better than this, you know? And so that's really kind of where that all started.
Right, nice job, guys.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, you guys.
Thank you.
Next item is our consent agenda.
I'll make the motion.
Thank you.
I can second.
A motion by Sarah Brink and a second by Mary to approve our consent agenda. I will call for the vote. That is approved. Next item is our financial report. Approval of the bills. I will make a motion.
Second.
A motion on the floor by myself and a second by Jeff to approve the bills. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I will call for the vote. And the bills for August are approved. Next item is the treasurer's report, a discussion item. Any discussion on the treasurer's report?
I don't have anything specific to add on the report, but we'll just share that our auditors were in our office all this past week, so made a lot of headway on getting through our audit, and things are looking good. That will be on track to get that completed timely.
Very good. Thanks, Sarah. Board reports and updates. Any updates from the board?
Friday night, the Pride and Tiger did their Hall of Fame presentation. Hall of Honor. Yeah, Hall of Honor. Yeah. That was a fun event. They, at the homecoming football game, they did the presentation and, announced who they were. So so there was Bruce and Vicki Lamprecht that were added to the Hall of Honor, and it was Drew Kinseth, and then it was Jane and Harry Wallagi as well. So that was just a fun event.
Yeah, nice ceremony. Then they were recognized at halftime at the football field too. So
Yeah.
that was nice.
Yep.
Very good. Anybody else? All right, moving on to our administrators' reports. Jeremy.
Yeah, so I'm going to share. We're going to do these a little bit different this year. So board members and community, if you're watching in the notes, what you see in your packet, I've asked each site to give me like a bulleted list, kind of highlights of what's going on, to simplify maybe the reading of that a little bit, but still sharing what's going on. Then I'll share a summary kind of what that is. So beginning of the year has been really busy. I think we're off to a great start. A lot of momentum at all of the sites. Some of you have been to different sites and you've been helping give different presentations about the referendum and such of the sites. And it's so much fun to just feel that start of the year energy. Homecoming, the first week of school our second week of school is busy, but it was exciting too. Certainly we had a lot of excitement with staff, just the dress up days and stuff. So that's been fun. I'm going through the reports. Parkside and Early Childhood, we had assessment and open house events they talk about in the report. We had good attendance at those this year. Staff beginning of the year focused on building routines and relationships. That's kind of how we start the year, especially with our youngest learners, just building that routine of being in school. They also share they've got 2 grants recently from the Lyon Murray County Families Collaborative. One is supporting attendance incentives for K-1. With that, they were able to purchase a bike they'll be giving away for students with certain attendance criteria. And then they are also able to offer some free parent education nights for preschool families. So that grant helps cover the costs associated with that. Southview, Pete talks about entering the 3rd and final year of their implementation of the BAR, or Building Assets, Reducing Risks. They are starting to meet twice a month in their big block meetings. That's where they start talking about that data as a whole group. Big blocks have teachers from different grade levels. So really looking at, like Darcy talked about in her presentation, looking at that data and identifying students that are in need of different interventions. That's one of the ways, that happens. Certainly some referrals are brought forward by staff and such in there. He also highlights the new assessments. I know Beth presented on that at our last board meeting too, but looking at M-Class Math, reading, and the CAPTE Read Basics for the fourth graders on up. Those are being piloted to support learning, and Southview has already been giving those tests. I believe they're almost done assessing at Southview for the fall benchmark setting assessments. So a lot of work taking place there. Middle school, Peggy shared, they had their open house. They had over 95% student attendance, so really good attendance at that. Kicked off the year, they had a fun assembly in the theater with the kids and talked it through. I say fun, they're talking about school rules and back to school kind of stuff, but as fun as that is, it was amazing. Yeah. She also shares again about her new advisory and flex period. She talked about that in a couple board reports, but those are going well at the middle school. She shared there's some consistent support and enrichment opportunities, another time to meet those student needs individually and give some time outside of, so you're not pulling out of a core to do some of those things. In Brian's report for the high school, he talks about a strong start to the year, high engagement in activities and academics. He highlighted homecoming. The theme was Welcome to the Jungle. We had some royalty crowned last week and a lot of different events happening throughout the week. Teams certainly had a successful week as well, and there were a lot of students that enjoyed the dance Friday night. At ALC and CTI, focuses on improving attendance. That's going to be our big focus with the ALC in particular this year, and engagement, doing some different things through advisory activities and career readiness. That's really how we're connecting to those kids. The career piece is huge at the ALC. That's been really effective there. CTI, he talks about students are actively building skills and practicing shop safety. We're not going to start doing the welding until we reviewed the safety measures and such out there. So that's what's taking place at CTI. Activities, there is never a lack of things there. Mitch also talked about homecoming. That was last week again. Student council with a new advisor. They had some really fun events this year. Overall, MHS hosted 17 games last week, so it was a very busy week, but nice opportunity to promote activities across the board. Mitch also mentions the Hall of Fame. The M Club is hosting its Hall of Fame induction ceremony this fall. This event will honor and celebrate 4 new inductees whose accomplishments have left a lasting impact on Marshall athletics and activities. Those being inducted to the M Club this year are Chelsea Pack or Marquardt, Pat Ersfeld, Bruce Remy, and Drew Kinseth, who Sarah mentioned was Hall of Honor through Pride and the Tiger. He will also be inducted in the M Club Hall of Fame. For board members, just FYI, that event is Saturday, November 15th. That takes place at the Golf Club. Tickets are $30 for that. You can contact Amber Gorder at the high school. We'll have Emily send something out to you and remind you of that too, but encourage you to attend that event. It'll be a nice event this fall. Trisha reports a number of things in hers. It has not been a slow fall for Trisha. I got summer projects done and fall stuff that just kind of keep rolling. You may have noticed when you pulled in the back parking lot, a project's just started this week back here, the bike trail that we've been talking about. They started work on that today. They made some really good progress back there today. City of Marshall is doing that. It's a bike path that will run all the way from C Street to Southview Street. And then there'll be an extra path that runs from that all the way over to the Southview so the kids can get onto the bike racks and that sort of thing right up to Southview Elementary. We're excited about getting this done, a safe option for kids biking or walking to Southview. The plan is yet to finish that this year, and watching the progress that started, we're excited to see that come together. And we've talked about that at a few board meetings. There were some grants that are completely covering the cost of that. Originally, there could have been a cost for a piece of that to the school district, but the grants are able to cover all of that now. So thank you to the city for their work on that and cooperating and just working with us on that too. I know they've talked about extra safety measures around there and making sure that happens. Trisha also shared in her report that we recently got a $2,000 safety grant from SFM, that's our work comp provider, that'll buy some entryway rugs for the district, which I had no idea how much rugs cost until you start pricing them for some of the stuff. It's silly, but that grant will help make sure we have those at the entryways. Finally, in her report, she shared that as we're planning for the J-turn installation that'll happen off Highway 23. MnDOT has talked about this recently. That happened in 2028, but part of the planning for that, there were some traffic counts that took place last week up in front of the high school, and had some questions about what the cameras were for and what was going on there. So that's what that was prepping for that. In Sarah's report, she talks about the annual renewal of our workers' comp that takes place October 1st each year. Our experience modification factor has been calculated at 1.14 for this year. That's applied to the premiums from October 1st of 25 until October 1st of 26. Last year, that mod rate was 0.64, so it's up a little bit, but it is still lower than it has been over the past several years. And in her report, she shares what those numbers were for you. Past year, we worked on a written procedure for handling workers' comp claims and have really seen improvement in reporting and response times, better serving employees as we can through that process. So thank you, Sarah, for your work on that. Finally, in Beth's report, she shares that there is a language access plan. This is a new MDE requirement. This is a plan that we're required to have in place to show when you have a non-English speaking family come in. We talk a lot about how we meet the needs of that student, but this plan talks in general for that whole family. How do we meet the needs of that family to connect to our school and our programming and what have you? So that language access plan is also attached to the board agenda tonight for approval. That's what I got.
Thanks, Jeremy. Any questions for Jeremy? All right, we'll move on to our action items. The first one is approval of resolution of the budget reductions in the event of an unsuccessful operating referendum. I will make a motion.
I'll second.
Yes, there's a motion by myself and seconded by Jeff to approve this. Any further discussion?
Share just a couple of things. This would be following the guidelines of the cuts that we outlined at our last board meeting. It's the resolution says for a minimum of 1.9 million. As you remember, the cuts that we outlined were just over that. This would take place if the referendum is not successful. Those are the cuts that would happen in order to balance our budget for future years. So I also want to reiterate that none of the cuts in that list are things we want to do. I know that I've talked with all of you as well. I know these aren't cuts board wants to do as well, but certainly need to have a plan for what we do to balance the budget. We can't continue to operate out of our reserve funds. So if the referendum passes, these cuts would not happen. But if the referendum is not successful this fall, the resolution would call that those cuts would be presented a final list no later than February 2nd. So we would move forward with that at that point.
Thanks, Jeremy. Any further discussion? I will call for the vote. And that is approved. Next action item is approval of Superintendent Williams' 25-26 performance goals.
So
Thank you, Sarah. Motion by Sarah Brink and a second by Mary to approve Mr. Williams's performance goals for the 25-26 school year. Any further discussion?
Share these two goals this year like we do most years. One of them is focused on curriculum assessment. A lot of work around the READ Act, so that's a piece of it. The other piece is around the referendum work, so those are two goals. And then you'll see also attached to that agenda item just a memo that I'm sending to the board that will be approved along with this. If the referendum is not successful, I will voluntarily not take the incentive compensation this year. That's part of my contract.
Very good. I will call for the vote. That is approved. Next action is approval of the certificate of preliminary levy.
Motion.
Thanks, Jeff.
second.
Thank you. A motion by Jeff and a second by Sarah Brink to approve the certificate of the preliminary levy, which we do every September. Is there any further discussion? All right, I'll call for the vote. And that is approved. With nothing else on the agenda, I will adjourn the meeting. Thanks, everybody.